Okay, let's get this straight. This video is not about the RC car you're seeing right now. This video is about the little micro Cinewhoop drone that's following the RC car. More about that drone in a second. This is just a fun little chase scene that I was able to take advantage of a couple days ago. Enjoy. How's it going, everybody? Ed Ricker here, outside on a beautiful March afternoon weekend, and I have the Beta95X version 3 right here. I'm going to be doing some flight footage and some review of it, as well as perhaps comparing it to the V2, Beta95X V2. Now, last year I put out a video about the Beta95X V1, and it was more of a normal looking micro Cinewhoop, but these are what you would call pusher style. So the motors are mounted underneath the frame, and the frame is being pushed up by the motors, as opposed to the original version 1 last year, where it was kind of being pulled by the motors. This might help with stability if you're putting a light decased action cam, either like a GoPro Light or perhaps the new Insta360 SMO 4K camera. Both very, very light, ultralight options that still produce great quality results. And then we have this mount here, and this is something that I printed custom for the 95X V3. Didn't come with it, but this is for the GoPro 8 decased right here. And this is a little side project I did just a few months ago. This is a 3D printed casing around a decased GoPro Hero 8 Black. 23 grams, this guy right here. That's pretty crazy. And you can see on the back, there is a little plug that would go to, oh, I don't know, something just like that. Little plug straight to the LiPo battery of the 95X V3. So you're powering something like this, an action cam, whether a decased GoPro Hero 8 like this, or the Insta360 SMO 4K, straight off the LiPo battery of the drone. You're saving weight. You're not using the weight of the action cam. It's just a lot easier, a lot lighter. There's one battery to worry about. And then what you do is you would go into a cell phone, like I'm using the Pixel 4 by Google, to access the GoPro app and control that GoPro or that maybe that SMO camera with the corresponding app. Now, there's a big difference between this and the version 2. Also, the version 3 has these nice red foam bumpers. So if you're flying this in an indoor environment, around people, around expensive cars, in through cars like we've seen a few of the people do last year, having something like this would really be helpful so you don't scratch or maybe even worse, do other damage or injury to people. This is going to be able to bounce off things pretty easily. So now, stock, this came with the SMO 4K camera connector. But I was able to print this with my 3D printer at home, my Soval SV01, to hold my GoPro. So let me just plug in, or rather push in, my GoPro. There we go. And it still absolutely boggles my mind that this is a GoPro. And then this connector is natively for the SMO 4K camera, but of course, they thought of everything. They give you a little adapter harness so you can plug this in, plug in directly to the back of your GoPro, as I will do. And now we're powering our decased GoPro off of the LiPo battery of the micro Cinewhoop, and we're in business. We have our SD card right there, and this is very soft mounted. As you can see, we're very spongy on the material, and it's nicely built that way. When you look at the V2, it's the same way. It's a little bit more of a wider footprint for that GoPro housing, but either way, this seems to work out good, and you can adjust that height, of course, by just using a screwdriver and adjusting that. So this is the analog video version. Now, that's just because that was the one that they had to send me. I would have preferred the DJI FPV version, and I might just take the Caddx Vista out of this one and put it in this one if this one turns out to be the better choice, which it's seeming to be. But you can see very low profile analog antenna right there. It's just kind of housed right in there, and the battery slips in right here, toilet tank style. So kind of laying like this, as opposed to long ways. It's more width-wise. You would plug that in, and then we have 5 blade props, as opposed to 3-blade props. Slightly lower kV motors because of that. So the version 2 motors were 4500 kV versus the version 3, which is 3800 kV. So lower kV motors, but more bite from those props. And so we'll see what flight time we get. They suggest using a 4S 450 milliamp hour battery right here. So here's Beta FPV's 4S 450 milliamp hour battery. It's not high volt. Let's get this up in the sky. By the way, it's XT30, so whatever battery you use, make sure that you have an XT30 battery, which is basically just half the size of an XT60. By the way, I'm loving my new camera. Look at this autofocus. Just want to show that off to you real quick. I've been struggling with autofocus for so long. So anyway, yeah. For the battery, what I'm going to do is plug it in and then wrap it around. And we're mounting it widthwise, like that, which is kind of interesting. Gets things out of the way, especially for that action cam. And then the GoPro is technically being powered right now. We just need to access it with our app on the cell phone. And it found the GoPro that I previously bound to the cell phone, which is great. Now this process right here, connecting, takes its sweet time, and I don't think it takes quite so long with my V2. It's using the same connector essentially, but yeah, we do see a bit of a delay connecting between the 95X with the GoPro attached and the GoPro app. Now you could hit the record button on the top of the D-case unit there, but if you want to affect your settings at all, you do have to wait for this process. Also with this particular system, I don't get a preview, but I'm trusting that my settings are correct because I'm using mostly auto settings. And here we go. So I'm recording on the GoPro. I'm gonna put on my goggles, which are my DJI goggles with an analog mod. I can't make anything simple. All right, so now we have video, 16.6 on the battery, so we've lost a little bit. I chalked that up to me fiddling around, getting the GoPro recorded and all that. So we do lose a little bit on the battery, just sitting here waiting on the GoPro app to essentially connect. And that is a downside to this process. Now that the drone is up and running, you can see that with the goggle view on the lower right of the image, that's the analog video feed that I'm seeing displayed in my goggles as I'm flying the Beta95X version 3. The video quality is pretty good, all things considered. Now, it's not good when you're comparing it to DJI FPV Digital, but still not bad for analog. The video transmitter tops out at 250 milliwatts, according to the website. So even though I get a little breakout going around some of these obstacles, it's still pretty clear, and the image looks decent with this EOS camera by Beta FPV. This particular clip, I'm using Hypersmooth on the naked GoPro Hero 8, but I also flew with 4x3 4K and applied Real Steady Go stabilization to that footage. And so this clip right here is with Real Steady, and it looks a little bit different. The smoothing process is a little bit more heavy-handed. This is great for getting some of those cinematic shots. Maybe if you're doing this for a client and you had to use this tiny little FPV around people or something, you might want to use something like Real Steady. Otherwise, usually Hypersmooth is more than enough for just having a fun time outside. Even though this review is not about the naked Hero 8, I still think it's pretty cool how we can get a Hero 8 Black on a quad this small. It's just amazing footage for something this small and light. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm getting blown around a lot right now. The wind picked up as I was flying, and since this is so light, I kind of get carried away a little bit. I kind of have to push against the wind just in order to fly a straight line. So it's not the best flyer when you're outside and it's breezy, but in a less windy condition, or maybe indoors or something sheltered like that, you should have a great time with this. You can see in that FPV feed, every once in a while there's some jello, some vibration, some oscillation maybe in that camera. I'm not sure if that's coming through the frame or if that's specific to this type of camera. I'm not really sure. It seems to be maybe a frame issue, but I don't think it's a tuning issue. So I think we're just getting some oscillations and some vibrations coming through the TPU printed camera mount that's attached to the 95X version 3 frame. Now the FPV camera does get some jello, especially with high punches like that or when wind comes into play. Let's push it a little bit of ways and see what's going on. By the way, I should clarify, this is the Crossfire version of this guy. So I'm flying Crossfire radio transmission. And we are actually pretty far away from ourselves right now. Got a little windy over here, you can kind of tell. I'm actually somewhat behind the building. Yeah, that worked out pretty well. So I'm gonna come back through here. Looking at my battery, we're almost at the tail end of this flight. It's kind of pushing against the wind. It's so light, you know. This is like under 100 grams without the GoPro, and I believe without the battery. So with the whole GoPro and everything all up weight, it's this heavy, because I still have to weigh it. This heavy. And one thing I'm gonna try here is to see how quick I can get my V2 to connect with that GoPro. So I'm trying to connect here with the V. Wow, that went a lot faster. Huh. Okay, so my V2 is powering on and even previewing that decased GoPro. And the V3 can't seem to do that. I wonder if it's not supplying enough power. That might be the case. My average flight time was between 4 and 4.5 minutes. I did have one that lasted only about 3 or 3.5 minutes, but I was pushing it a little bit more. Speaking of pushing it, this has some power. With the 4S battery and the 5-blade props, I was really cutting through the air, and honestly, it was going pretty freaking quick trying to chase a couple of these cars down the street here. I had as much power as I needed for something this small. This isn't like 5-inch FPV quad power, but this is definitely enough power to get you where you need to be when you're using a decased, action cam. I'm using Crossfire as my radio link protocol, so I wasn't really concerned about signal range for my radio. Video feed probably would go out first in that case, and followed by my Crossfire. If you're using FreeSky or Spectrum or whatever else, which is also available, you just have to make the choice, the option on the purchase page, then you might have a different story, so really depending on your situation. Looking at the website, you can get this for about $180 US dollars, plug and play, or they can add a receiver of your choice for a little bit more. And then if you want to go with the HD digital VTX version, it's $280. So $100 more to basically throw a Caddx Vista in there. So the 95X V3 feels powerful with these motors and these props. It has decent analog video from what I've seen, although I would prefer DJI digital, that's okay. Seems to be decently tuned. There's a little bit of jello, but that's probably coming in through the camera, through the frame, and not necessarily a tuning issue. It's handling itself moderately in this breeze that I'm working with right now, but to fly it indoors is probably where you really see this thing shine, or a day with really no wind. And I was getting maybe 4 minutes of flight time. I was using Crossfire, so I really didn't care about distance for, radio transmission. Instead of having the antenna mounted like this, this is just a design that I made, they actually have it glued behind the foam bumpers, the antenna for the Crossfire, or perhaps also for FreeSky or whatever you might use as your radio link protocol. So it's hidden, and it's inside underneath this foam. That's pretty cool. Now you might want to reinforce that sticky, because I did notice that when I got this, it was starting to peel up a little bit. So it's a constant pushing back in to make sure that doesn't fall out. Biggest gripe, however, is how long it takes the GoPro to connect to the app when using this one as opposed to this one. So there's something about the way that this is being powered where I'm not getting the punch, the battery amp draw or something, the voltage, to really kick this Hero 8, decased Hero 8 into high gear. I was able to get a preview out of the V2 hooked up with that little harness. But with the V3, it seemed like it was taking forever just to get to the process where I could even hit the record button through the GoPro app. You can't just have this thing sit for 2 minutes waiting for the GoPro app to link to it, burning battery, which is precious enough with something this small. So anyway, that's what I'm thinking. thank you so much to Beta95 or Beta. Thank you so much for Beta95V3 for sending me this all the time. They'd be sending the 95X V1, the 85X, all these different quads. I appreciate it, and I like the majority of them. But I do hope that we can at least figure out some of this power draw issue with the Hero 8. Hey, the bus is here. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and until next time, happy flying.